check the issue out in the round to make sure that, you know, there could be some unfortunate results. Thanks.
Yeah, I think when we're looking at climate change, we're also looking at public transport, clean public transport. For clean public transport to work, that's to be reliable, arrives on time, it has to have clear space. Not clear space for 4 hours a day, but clear space, like transport lanes, public transport lanes. So how this is implemented is not something that we are qualified to comment on, but we think it is a possible idea that you could investigate further to generate income from those that cause emissions. So that's the thinking behind our proposal. Now, as I said, we are not the experts on traffic management. We just live with the consequences of roads not being available for public transport.
Councillor Ferry, please.
Kia ora. Thank you for the presentation, and just really appreciate the opportunity, Chair, to bring to the committee some stuff that's around revenue generation as well as expenditure control. So thank you to the Chair for that. I think it's really useful that we focus in this space as well. My question is around the sort of, I guess, the practical next steps for this, which I would see as potentially this committee putting it forward to Auckland Transport for further investigation. Is that something, as the presenters, that you think would be a useful next step?
Yes, yes, we'd be quite happy for that. We'd be quite happy to work with Auckland Council and Auckland Transport. I should have included both. Yes, we would. Thank you.
Thank you. To that end, Chair, could we include a recommendation there to forward it to Auckland Transport for them to work on and come back to a future committee meeting of this committee?
I don't believe we have the power to forward it on. We have the power to what? We can send it off to them to okay, we can send it off to them for their consideration.
Okay, can we put a time frame on them? I guess I'm just thinking about current budget issues. This is the kind of thing that implementation would take a while. So okay. Can we give them a time frame to maybe come back?
I'm only getting very used to the protocols and that I'm being advised that not on public input we can do that. We can just send it off for their consideration only.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dalton.
Julie just asked my question. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. I think there's crossovers here with the draft parking strategy as well, so that might mean it might come back to the infrastructure committee. But I think it's an interesting proposal, and while these fine individuals are not experts in the area, I think we could hand it over to experts and start to unpack it a bit.
Mayor Wayne Brown.
I've got a couple of things. I just looked up the AA fact sheet, and it says generally diesel engines emit a lower level of CO2 per kilometre travelled, so could be considered better for the environment. But you actually said that 81% of them comes from diesel, so I don't know whether that's right or wrong. But that's just a detail of your thing, the overall thing of what.
Your Worship, I live on Queen Street, and I appreciate you're a city centre resident as well. Since the city bus, the Red Link, City Link bus fleet has been electrified, we've certainly noticed a lowering in the emissions in the Queen Street, Waihoratu Valley, and also the cleanliness of the air, just to add to for what you just said.
Okay, I mean, it's just a detail. It doesn't challenge your proposal, and I do support it also as a city resident. That's why I want to have freight put off trucks onto trains. So good luck with getting 1.6 million people to pay $500,000. your face will be on the please pay me, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the publicity you get.
Okay, Councillor Newman.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? I got a couple of questions from me. Is this if the I'm not there appears to be multiple objectives and multiple outcomes that you're seeking here. If the objective is to free up the road corridor to allow for ease of passage for PT, is this best targeted at corridors for which there is contracted PT services running on that route, or is this everyone? That's the first question.
This is a submission that we made to the annual plan last year, and it was about climate change. So that's primarily the focus of the original submission. Now, the Mayor was proposing a climate change action targeted rate or something like that. And this was a suggestion we put forward that we thought provided an opportunity for council to consider raising a very, very substantial amount of money that also was directed toward climate change initiatives. So that's the genesis of this. And when we're presenting, it's quite difficult to confine it down to just climate change because it does impact on transport.
Okay, and Councillor Henderson, please.
Thanks. It's a comment, but I suppose there's a question there as well. I think Councillor Ferry makes an excellent point about referring it to AT. Can I seek clarification before I make my comment from staff? Would we be looking to do that in a resolution? What's the mechanism for AT to actually get it?
Correct. There'll be a resolution on screen momentarily, and we will just be forward as part of the minutes process.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, 500, there didn't seem to be any magic to that number. You could dial it back to, I mean, even if you looked at $50 a year, which is extremely cheap, that's 85 million in revenue, according to the numbers that we've been provided. You know, I really support this kind of stuff coming to this committee, Chair, where we are looking not just at the costs of things, but we're actually looking at revenue. I've said in several debates, you know, we're focusing necessarily on savings quite a bit. I understand the necessity of that. But we need to not forget that actually revenue raising opportunities are just as important, in my view, so that we can save essential services. There's a revenue raising opportunity right here. I think there are some good philosophical underpinnings behind it. And it's an exciting opportunity. So I'd really like AT to give it some serious consideration because, you know, acknowledging there is some policy work to be done around here on the why and also the how, like the means of collection, for example. But, you know, I really applaud the presenters for bringing this to us. And thanks for my time, Chair.
That's a pleasure. By the way, we do have 4 or 5 councillors present today that are not part of this committee, but I'm really keen for you to take part whenever you want. I'd like to run a very open ship. If you've got comments, questions or anything, please jump in. I don't think you're allowed to vote, but I think you're allowed to do everything else under my watch. So we get to the recommendations now. We've had the extra bit in red that we refer the presentation to Auckland Transport for their consideration. I'm going to move that from the chair. Those in favour?
Aye.
Oh, we need a second.
I'll second. Ferry.
Ferry, second. Okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Carried. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Item 6 would be local board input, but none has been received. Item 7 is extraordinary items and none are known. And so we get to item number 8, please, which is the Ports of Auckland. We're going to ask Roger Gray and Andrew Clark and anybody else he may have from his team to come up and to update us on the Ports of Auckland Limited, on their savings and progress on that. Thank you so much. The floor is yours, Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to give you, and we'd like to give you a short presentation, but we'd also like to pick your brains as well and take suggestions on areas that you might be starting to look at that you think we could look at. We are very keen to have a very open and honest dialogue with the committee. So if we move to the, have I got the clicker? Yep, here we go. So just to talk about our results, obviously safety is our first and primary responsibility, and I'm really pleased to see that that continues to improve across the port, largely off the back of building a better working relationship with MUNS, our main union. We have established a stevedore code of practice, which will be rolled out this month, which is the first port in the country to actually have that. Profitability is obviously core also to the turnaround of our Regaining Amana strategy, and our responsibility to you is to give you a fair return on your investment that you have with us. Our SCI target for this financial year is 35 million, up from 27 million last year. What I'd be able to say to you is that we are very confident that we will exceed that, that target this year. Now, the reason I'm not giving you specific numbers is because today is an open committee meeting and we're announcing our half-yearly results tomorrow, but we have provided in our half-yearly report to Council the actual half-yearly numbers, so many of you are probably aware of them. So very pleased with that, and we're also looking, as the Chair has advised the Mayor, that we are looking this year to provide a $30 million dividend to Council, up from where we were last year at 14.2. We're obviously working hard to get the port ticking. We're seeing throughput increase significantly from over the last year. We're processing about 3,000 containers a week more than we were this time last year, and the turnaround of the operation is progressing well. We are moving to reinstate berth windows next month, and that will further enhance our reliability. We'll be doing that in conjunction with Tauranga, Napier, and also Littleton. But we are and continue and want to work closely with Council, and we've got a number of areas that we're doing that. We have already initiated work with your insurance team, and we've moved our insurance into your program, and that has saved $450,000. So that's a good first step. We're now working with the CFO and also the whole Council Treasury area. Andrew's been doing some good work on what are the options for us using your funding to allow us to get a cheaper rate of interest. And the order of magnitude there that we're looking at, potentially subject to getting this approved by the board, who we're talking to it about this afternoon, is potentially $3 to $4 million. So it's a substantial saving, and so we want to look at how we can take that opportunity. We're obviously working with Matt and the procurement team. From our team, I know they've met on what are the joint procurement opportunities that we've got, and we're certainly taking advantage of the all of government and your procurement buying power. And we're also working to do a few small things, but they all add up. You know, we're not producing a full set of results at half year this year like we used to do. That's $50,000 in saving. And we're also working with the CFO on what are the best way to optimise tax through the use of some of your significant tax losses that are held within the group. So there's some of the things we've started, but as I said, we're also here to take advice. Any suggestions that you or any officials might have to help us as well, we'd love to hear them. And certainly we're looking forward to being that significant revenue generator for you that we deserve to be and we should be, and as the Mayor's asked us to do. What I will say is we are committed next year at the Mayor's request and Council's request to deliver 52 million NPAT. We will do that. And our team are working to try where we can to exceed that. Really, that's where we've got to. We're very hopeful that we can work openly with you. If there's any information that you want us to share with you, we're very happy to do that. And similarly, we invite those of you who are yet to visit the port to come down and have a look at what we're doing and the turnaround that's underway. So I'll leave it there and take any questions.
Thank you for that. I think Councillor Newman is first off the rank here.
So with respect to the letter of expectation, we've got some draft KPIs proposed in that. You reckon the port can meet or exceed all of those proposed KPIs, the financial KPIs set out in our newsletter?
The only KPI that I think is a challenge, which has a potential to distort, is a 10% return on assets. We think that is probably higher than anybody else. Ports of Tauranga do not produce at that level. And so 10% there. We'll be coming back with some suggestions in our draft SCI to you on that. But all the others we think are pretty reasonable.
Okay, I'm feeling a little bit weird here. There is no further question. Councillor Darby? Okay, Councillor Darby.
That one's on. Good off. Just in terms of the impairment from Focus Shipping, you're pretty confident that it would be limited to that 400k. There's probably flow through to stevedoring companies as well, but that's not going to be on your sheet. You're pretty confident that that's not going to grow in any way. You've got a pretty clear handle on that one now.
Just to set the context for people, if you're not aware, Focus Shipping Line went into liquidation last week. Our exposure at this stage is 450. It's gone up a little. We identified one other invoice that hadn't yet been charged. We're working with the liquidators on that. I expect we won't get anything for it back. We'll lose 450k. You know, it's not ideal, but it's one of those costs of doing business. I think you'll find there are a whole lot of other players across the sector who are going to struggle. I am concerned for the transport sector right now, just more broadly, and I raised this yesterday at Audit and Risk, with the expansion of trading terms being put on them by a number of cargo owners. They're being pushed out to 90 days, and some of them are starting to find cash flow challenges when we're charging demurrage, we're charging access fees, which then eventually get paid for, but they become the de facto bank for the cargo owners. So I do worry a bit about the transport sector and some of the challenges, but again, that's more of a macroeconomic risk rather than a port risk.
And just, I was surprised to read a company that had only been trading, 4 months or something, went into liquidation. Seemed to be well backed and well thought through, but folded. So is that sort of thrown up a bit of an alert to Ports of Auckland to look at other shipping companies and how and when they pay, or is there of no concern?
Oh no, we're always focused on our debtors, and when people go out, you know, past 30, 60, 90 days, and you want to bring that in, so it's an active management. We report that to the board every month, and we keep that under control. Am I concerned about other shipping lines? No. To be brutally frank, the amount of money that most of the shipping lines have made in the last 2 years will pay for all of our bills for the next decade. So whilst a number of them will no doubt cry poor, that things are going badly, that freight rates are coming down, they've made a lot of money. So I'm not worried about that.
Okay, Councillor Walker.
Sure, just a couple of questions. Just going to the KPIs, as much and all as we may have made a suggestion around a KPI, and I take your comment around the return on assets. I mean, there are options where it might not be return on all of the assets, but what's particularly relevant is your investment in plant and so on, because, you know, that's the stuff that goes to investment and return criteria. So I just put to you that you could come back to us with some stuff around that. The other thing that I've certainly highlighted that I'm interested in reporting to the committee that I chair is around break-even analysis, fixed, variable, semi-variable costs, because quite obviously the main thing we're interested in is probably less expenditure control and more increasing revenue. You know, that's where the dividend and all the potential is. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the offer of us coming back with alternate metrics. We will be doing that. We're in the process of drafting our draft SCI response now. Break-even analysis, absolutely critical. We've done that across the trades. And if you remember in my very first presentation to council, I talked to you about how the container terminal was not making money. It was losing money last financial year. Well, that's now changed. The container terminal is now making money. And that's part of what we'll be announcing tomorrow. So it's we're very, very focused on trade by trade profitability and making sure that we get trade by trade decent return on assets that we've got deployed for those.
Just a bolt-on question. I mean, one of the issues that we're confronting in terms of getting better information across the organisation is around, confidentiality, but particularly commercial sensitivity. So my question is really around on your part, if you're able to explore that, so that we're able to get a maximum of information that's relevant and doesn't impair commercial sensitivity.
Well, as our owner, our records are available to you and whatever you want. So we're quite relaxed about, and that's part of what we spoke about. I'm keen to open up whatever you'd like to come and have a look at. We're quite relaxed about that. I mean, we trust the commercial confidence that you as our owner has, and there'll be discussions that will be had commercially in confidence, which we're quite relaxed about. No criticism to our friends in the press, but we'd rather do those in confidence rather than in public meetings. But we're very open to whatever you or officials would like to have a look at.
It's a great response, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Foley.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, team, for your presentation. Thank you also, for starting off by saying that safety is paramount. I just wanted to get an assurance from you, though, because I know there's pressure on you to find those savings, but that those savings are not going to come at a cost in terms of safety to your workers and also safety to the public, that there won't be a compromise made in order to find those savings. Kia ora.
On my children's grave, I promise you that. Okay. I'll give you an example. We had an MSC ship alongside about 3 weeks ago. We were working that ship and the crew continued to walk into the exclusion zone. The exclusion zone is underneath where we're working. And the crew continued to work on that. The two of our one middle level manager and one junior leader made the decision to stop working that ship until the master would sign a piece of paper to say that those two people were rewarded, not punished. We lost 300 moves as a result because we moved on to work on the ship and we lost the time that would have been the equivalent of 300 moves. And I don't care. I will not work a ship unsafely. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay. And can I say the board and management, and nor do we feel that pressure from you to compromise on that. So no one is asking us to do that.
Kia ora, thank you so much.
Councillor Lee.
I suppose we're getting a wee bit away from expenditure control, but congratulations, gentlemen, on turning the container business around. Does the company have information on the impact of the competition between Tauranga and Auckland in the container business, benchmarked against commercial price for, average Pacific Basin port costs for landing containers? Do you have that data? It must be impacting on Auckland and Tauranga, a kind of a race to the bottom.
So the answer is, yeah, we've got the information. We're focused at our port on improving return to you and return on our assets. I think the old days of volume for volume's sake as an approach between businesses is very different today. I have no qualms in shrinking the business to make more money rather than buying unprofitable volume, which has been something that's been done in the past. So What I will say is when you benchmark New Zealand, we are a traditionally extremely cheap stevedoring sector compared to other parts of the world. And I think I've used this example before, but our access charge for a vehicle booking system is now $65. Port of Melbourne is $120. When I arrived 12 months ago, it was $8.35. So I think there's still room to move as the sector starts to do it. And if some of those decisions lose some volume to other ports, then from my perspective, that's fine, as long as we continue to improve our return to you as our owner.
Thank you.
Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you. I commend you on putting safety first, but I don't think it should be out of being judged for the most cost-efficient application of that safety. Do you not have security guards that could have moved those people on and kept you working?
No, we don't have security guards that could walk onto a ship in an operating system. We've got leaders and ship leading hands who are on board, and they continue to indicate to those people not to work through for a number of times before, and they continue to work there. Now, there are language challenges with some crew because this was a foreign crewed ship, but the reality is they continue to give warnings to the crew continued to walk into the access area, therefore they made the right decision to stop working. So, but I take your point. There's always a tension between operational efficiency and safety. And the reality though is when you get to the decision point, safety must take priority over operations.
Thank you. Okay, the Mayor would like to have a couple of questions.
Yeah, thanks. Good that you're improving profitability. No one complains about that. And safety and volume are not really profit orientated, actually. That's the way you run it. I think generally our rates have been too low, and I think you recognise that as well. But I did want to mention that return on assets, whilst it may be uncomfortable, is an important thing to a KPI, because that is the one that rates whether or not we're doing the right thing in is the port making best use of the land. And we need to know that. That doesn't mean there's not a plan to shift the whole thing out in one go at all, but it's a progressive one. And so I think that needs to be done. That return on assets might be able to be divided up into the 3 or 4 business sectors that you have, which is break bulk, cars and containers, and 3. And I think you're reporting along those lines. So, but generally, no one's complaining about the improvement you're making. Thanks.
Thank you. And look, we absolutely agree. We will be putting return on assets in. It's whether 10% is the right number versus others. That was the only point. But we're absolutely going to keep ROA in.
Well, that's acceptable. I fully understand that. I think the metric may or may not be right, but you have to have an eye on that thing. It's just essential.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, Roger, would you like to make any sort of final comments to the committee or anything else? I've pretty well covered most of what was wanting, but just any summary before we ask you to leave the table?
Only to say if opportunities come up as you dig into other parts of the business that you think would benefit us, please share them. And certainly there's full transparency on anything if you'd like to come down or you'd like us to come back with certain specific areas that you'd like to dig into. We're very relaxed about that. So thanks for the opportunity to be here, number one, and look forward to catching up with all of you around soon. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we've got a resolution which is to receive the update from the ports. We can have a bit of a debate on it if it's necessary, but I first of all need a mover from Daniel Newman and a seconder from Greg Sayers. So we've got it moved and seconded. We can just leave it open for debate if there's any comments wanting to be made. I think everyone's had a good say. Please do. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you. Just my comment would be a congratulatory one in terms of the trends that you've updated us on today. So thank you for that.
Okay, I think I should have asked you to leave the table, but I'm not familiar with the protocols around here. The fact that you were sitting 2 chairs back, I don't think will end the world for us. Okay, we've got a intervention from Councillor Newman.
Just a very quick comment. I mean, I like the tension in the draft KPI around the return on assets. And my expectation would be that the port should be able to break up components of their business. If there is a differential return on assets within their business, they should be able to reflect that as part of their response on the SCI, but I'm assuming that is something that they can address. Thank you.
Okay, no more debate, so we've had a mover and a seconder. I put the motion that we received the update from the ports. Those in favour, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, carried. Okay, let's move on to item number 9. Auckland Council Procurement Department overview. Can I get Matt Houseman and whoever else is going to be helping you, Matt, come to the table? You're just going to do it by yourself? Okay. So the purpose of this is to sort of provide a strategic overview to the Auckland Council Procurement Department, to the expenditure control and the committee, which is what we're going to do. I think we'll open it up for you, Matt, to start, and then we can go to questions and that later.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. I'm called Matt Hanson tēnei. So I'm Acting General Manager Procurement at Auckland Council. So yeah, today was really about giving you a high-level overview of the Procurement Department at Auckland Council. So I'll take you through a bit around the policy and framework, sourcing guidelines, some activity we've had from a group source perspective, and what our focus areas are for the next 12 to 24 months. It's really going to be a high-level overview, and I'm happy to take questions at the end as well. Could spend hours talking about procurement here, but it would be pretty boring for everyone, so it's kept at the right level, hopefully. So in terms of our policy and frameworks, our main overarching document we have is the Auckland Council Group Procurement Policy. So this came into effect last year and it extends to include the CCOs. And what that means in terms of the key principles we work to, first of all, is working together. So that's not only within Auckland Council, but also across the CCOs. So our rule of thumb is wherever possible, it makes sense to, we will procure with the other CCOs. So where we have commonality of requirements, timeframes on our contracts, etc. Number 2, Value to Ao Māori. So aligning with Te Tiriti, and also sort of embedding Kia ora Tamaki Makaurau into the way that we work and looking to deliver outcomes to Māori. And the way we do that is primarily through working to spend our contracts with the Māori suppliers where we can, and also embedding Māori tikanga, for example, within our own organisation as a department, but also with suppliers. It's something we sort of ask when we go to market, seeing how they're working towards the sort of similar objectives to what we have. Being sustainable, so that's social, economic, environmental, etc. And there's by the way, there's links in all of these, so you can click in and read them in your own sort of leisure if you need more information. Acting fairly, so being ethical and transparent. So we do publish all of our awarded contracts and also purchase order spend. So that's published on our website monthly. We're open to any suggestions how we can improve this, but generally we believe that we're in a good position in terms of sharing information to the public. Delivering best value for money, so not only cost but also value is over and above what we're spending on dollars. So we go to market, for example, we take a weighted approach. Some of it's heavily focused on price, some of it's heavily weighted on quality. It really depends on what we're trying to deliver. And last but not least, safety at work. So we actively review our standards, and we work particularly in the capital and construction space to make sure that all the suppliers we work with are compliant to the Health and Safety at Work Act. We take a very strong interest in making sure that this is delivered successfully through our contracts. So sourcing guidelines. these are guidelines, as in there are some exceptions to these, but generally speaking, this is how we work within the organisation in terms of risk and spend thresholds. So at the low end, so when we're spending less than $75,000, our approach can be direct award or also multiple quotes. And the delivery method for that will be purchase orders or a low value, low risk contract if there's, for example, specific deliverables that need to be captured within the agreement, or if it's for contractors where we need to, we can't just sort of deal on the back of a purchase order, T's and C's. For anything that's sort of above 75K, but lower than 300, there's a couple of methods we have. We do have direct award in some circumstances, and closed tenders. So this is where we'll invite a number of suppliers who have got the identified experience to participate. Generally speaking, this is lower risk, low complexity, and we would deliver that through a contract. We may also do an open tender in that situation. So as I said at the start, these are really guidelines. There are exceptions to the parameters that we're specifying here. And then for anything over the 300,000 mark, different approaches: open tender, closed tender, group source with the CCOs, and also strategic procurement. And by that is if we're spending over the DFA of CE, we will come to this committee with a project and seek your endorsement of a procurement request. We've got one coming in next month. So if you haven't been through that, then you'll witness that next month. So just a bit of a snapshot on the procurement department. So we have, it goes up and down, but on average about $1.2 billion to spend per year. And that's around 2,100 suppliers that contribute towards that. In terms of the processing, we're processing around 3,000 contracts annually, 11,000 purchase orders, and 60,000 goods receipts. So huge volume of activity across the procurement department. A lot of it is simple, requiring purchase orders and LVLRs in terms of the proportion of the volume, and that's what we have. A large part of the team are committed to supporting that side of the business. In terms of the model, we are fully centralized, so procurement is one team. We don't have procurement decentralized within departments, and about 50% of our staff are in what we call the procurement delivery team. So that's the more transactional side of procurement, the people that are raising purchase orders, managing the low value, low risk contracts, coordinating the goods receiving with the finance team. So yeah, big chunk of the team is in there. From a systems capability perspective, and I'll talk more about systems specifically in further slides. We currently use SAP Ariba as our sourcing tool. Within that tool, it is quite limited. It is focused on sourcing. We don't have contract management capability. And what I mean by that is really sort of prompts around contract expiry, the ability to manage contractor performance through the tool, all the stuff you'd expect in a contract management system. That's pretty advanced. We don't have that functionality. That's sort of done offline. And we don't have category management capability either, or sort of SRM, strategic supplier management capability. In terms of analytics, we use offline analytics tools in Power BI. Performance-wise, these are some of the key performance metrics we report on. We've got 98% of our spend under contracts. 70% of our spend is competitively contested. And as a department, we've won a number of awards in the New Zealand Procurement Excellence Awards over the last few years. So a little bit about benefits. So this is Auckland Council parent. This isn't the group, but these are the last 3 years that we've had, or these are reporting on the last 3 years. So we have what we call hard OPEX cost savings. So this is self-explanatory, really. It is operational spend reduction that comes out of budget. And then we have another number, which is the procurement benefits, which is broader. So this is mainly in the capital space. It includes things such as cost avoidance, where we're reducing the spend in the capital area where we've got a quote or an estimate in, and we're going and negotiating and we're getting a better deal, essentially. In terms of tracking those metrics, we've got a benefits delivery process, a framework, and we also have a monthly performance tracking tool that's reported up to ELT. Sustainable procurement. So it's one of our key areas of our framework. We've in the past had some success in this area in terms of being a first mover to publish our procurement targets. So no one else in government had done that by that point in terms of specifics. We've established partnerships with Ngāpuna Pukenga in partnership with the Ministry of Social Development. So we work with our suppliers to help people who are long-term unemployed get back into work. There's some other bits and pieces there. So we're also the first organisation to have sustainability-linked loans. So these are linked to our supply diversity targets. On the right-hand side there is our diverse supplier spend results. So diverse suppliers includes Māori, Pacifica, and social enterprises. So our target is 5%. We have gradually been tracking up. It's been slower than we would like. It has been moving in the right direction, with the exception of this sort of FY to date, where it's dropped down a little bit, largely to well, it's difficult to say exactly, but there's been a little bit with the coming out of COVID, we had some increasing spend in some areas, which distorted the percentage of spend. We're taking some actions to increase this and achieve our 5% target, which is ultimately where we need to get to. So this is really focused on technology. So one of the big changes we're seeing in the department in the next 12 months is we are implementing a new procurement system, which will replace Ariba. The reasons that we're doing this, one of them is that we're looking to have a system in place across council group. So that will enable us to not only get a better deal when we're buying the software, but also standardise our approach to procurement across the CCOs. We will be looking to deliver some savings through this new tool, through the way that we work. So currently when we conduct low value, low risk procurement, which is the stuff under 300k, we'll be getting quotes in. Those quotes are done outside of the system. So our procurement team or the business units will be going to suppliers and getting them to send in quotes through an email. That would be automated through the new system. So the quotations will come in through the system. It's a quick quote type system. So that will increase the visibility of those lower value, lower risk transactions. We're looking to increase or reduce the lead times, increase the efficiency of the department. So reduce the LVLR process time, which is low value, low risk process time, from 5 days down to 2 days, which obviously has a knock-on effect on the workload of the team. It will produce a better customer experience for our suppliers. There have been some complaints around working with council, particularly in Ariba, and the requirement to consistently repeat information that's already been provided around health and safety qualifications, for example. So we'll have a supplier portal that makes that interaction a lot better, and it will reduce the need for providing the same information that's been provided previously. In terms of the licensing costs, we will see a saving there. So the licensing costs will be reduced by 33%, which is 2.2 million in license cost savings over the next 5 years. An added bolt-on of the new software is it will support us reporting on our Scope 3 carbon emissions, which is essentially the emissions that are in the supply chain, so not directly produced by Auckland Council, but by our suppliers in the supply chain. With this slide, I really wanted to just make the point that we are always looking to improve and to do things differently. We're not sort of sat on our laurels, just happy with how things are. We're always looking for better ways of working. So I've got a few examples here. One of them is the Healthy Waters program delivery model. So with this, we essentially changed the way that we procure. So historically, every time we've had a requirement over a certain limit, we've had to go out and run a tender, and there's tens or hundreds of tenders across a sort of 3-year period, which is incredibly time consuming and arguably doesn't add a huge amount of value. So we've put in place a program delivery model where we've got 11 specific sub-panels and 52 suppliers across those panels. So when there's a requirement from the business within one of those sub-panels, we can go out to those pre-selected suppliers who have been qualified, who have demonstrated that they're the best ones in the market to do the work. So that's going to deliver huge efficiency for the Healthy Waters Department and help them get through their backlog of program activity. Lean Agile procurement is something that we've been doing for a little while. I guess it's a bit of a buzzword in the procurement field. And all it means really is moving away from a traditional procurement process where you may have a request for information followed by a tender, which goes out for, say, 6 weeks, and then the tender responses come in and you take weeks to evaluate them and then you award. In some cases, we've used a Lean Agile approach, which is really, it condenses down that time, where you, quite often you'll have a sort of workshop, you have all the suppliers in the room and all the stakeholders in the room. You'll be essentially performing an assessment of those suppliers' capabilities over 2 days. It's very interactive. It produces high quality results, and it's great in situations where you don't have a clear view of what the solution is going to be, workshopping with the suppliers to get the answers. So we've had a few of those that we've worked on. A recent one we had was for the new council website, or the website redesign. So through that process, we essentially reduced the time frame down to 3 months. It would have been a sort of 12 months plus project. And we also delivered savings through that process. Finally, in terms of another example of different ways of working, we've introduced Kanohi Ki Te Kanohi, which is face-to-face procurement. So we recognise that for some particularly smaller organisations, possibly social enterprises, Māori and Pacifica firms, they may not always put their best foot forward when they're competing in a traditional process where they've got to answer a lot of questions in a Word document, and they might not have as much experience doing that. So we've introduced a process where it gives them an opportunity to essentially get in front of our team and present in person what their solution would be to our requirements. So it's a different way of working. And again, it's quite early days of this. We have used it in a few situations, but we're looking to continue the rollout of this and use it where it's appropriate. It won't be for every procurement, but in certain circumstances, it's a better way of working. Just wanted to talk a bit about group source. So as I said before, we have a rule of thumb policy where it makes sense and where we've got aligned requirements and contract dates, we will work with the other CCOs to go to market together. So that means we don't have multiple organisations running tenders at the same time. We're able to aggregate our demand, leverage our scale, and ultimately produce better results for Auckland Council Group. There's a few examples here. If you were on the Strategic Procurement Committee last year, you might recognise a couple of these. One of them was the software licensing deal. So this was a whole bunch of software licensing, including our Microsoft licensing, Adobe, and some other common software that we have across the group. So we worked together. This was last year, and we delivered savings. The savings here are just for Auckland Council parent, but we delivered savings of 817k across the contract period. Some other ones there: IT hardware. This is our laptops, devices, peripherals. Again, we saved $1 million savings there over a 5-year period because we really managed to leverage our scale across the CCOs. I won't talk to the other ones, but yeah, I think you get the idea. We are continuing to do this. We do it wherever we can. And I guess since it's been up and running, the relationship that we've had with the other CCOs has just grown. We've got Andy Richards from AT Procurement behind me, and we're working really well together. And also with ports, we're starting to do some more work there as well in terms of leveraging our scale. So finally, this is just really a summary of what our priorities are as an organisation or as a department for the next FY. The first one is implementation of our procurement technology. We see this as the single biggest step change we can make in terms of the way that we're working and the ability to drive more efficiencies out of procurement. We'll continue to work on our pipeline. So this is our future activity, working with the business, seeing what's coming up in terms of business requirements that need to go to market. The better we have a view of our pipeline, the better we're able to then work with the CCOs and the rest of the business in terms of delivering procurement in a timely manner and getting the best results. Delivering on our sustainable procurement, so Māori outcome objectives. This is really important. I'm really keen to hit the 5% threshold, or the 5% target, sorry, for our diverse supplier spend. I think it can be done, and we're taking some steps to achieve this. Delivering department resource efficiency. So we know we've got some challenges across council in terms of budget constraints, and we're actively working to review how we best achieve this through the department and the resources we have available. Supporting group shared services. We know this is an agenda item that is a focus of this committee and will be in the future. We don't quite know what that looks like yet, but we're here to support that in any way that we can. And finally, the continued upskilling of contract management in the business. So we're just recognising that post-procurement activity, when we got a contract in place, a lot of the ongoing management of the contracts, the responsibility doesn't sit in procurement, it sits in the business with project managers, for example. So we need to make sure that those people have got the best skills they can in order to effectively manage those contracts, commercially and operationally. So we play a part in terms of providing that guidance to help those guys upskill where they can. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Matt. Can I just say to councillors here that I've heard from 2 or 3 of you or 4 along the way that there have been examples in your wards where people have been excluded from bidding and procurement because they didn't meet some nitpicking little, we don't have a particular position here, or you don't have an engineer that does that. And I raised it yesterday with officials and with Matt. I've been given a very clear steer that if you've got any examples of that, because it can often be just a disgruntled loser who didn't get the bid, but if any councillors have any issues like that, get them straight to Matt, because he's pretty confident we do not exclude anybody from our procurement process that's a valid person to be in the bidding. So the myths and legends can accumulate about what did and didn't happen, but sometimes there is a particularly legitimate case where someone who would have been a very valuable contributor to the procurement process got excluded, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen, and Matt is the person to contact in the first instance from any of you. Let's go to questions. I've got questions from Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. My question is, I think you've got some quite good head contracts, but my concern is that the subcontracts beyond the head contractors, and when you start to get down the chain with the subbies that basically undertaking work funded through that head contract, that's when the performance standards either fall away or collapse. And the assumption with the head contracts is that council parent, I suppose, for example, if you look at the full facilities maintenance contracts and the maintenance in our parks and reserves, presumably the organisation that holds the head contract is also responsible for the stewardship of the standards against the requirements, and that council, through its auditing, is also contributing. But I'm struggling to see that happening on a consistent basis. And I wonder how much confidence you have in the process that we have beyond the head contracts with the subcontractors, because that's where the problems arise. And as a ward councillor, I'm getting tired of continually having to go back and push and push and push for what I understood was a recognised standard for which the subcontractors would work to, but which are not being worked to. And then what am I supposed to do in response to that?
Yeah. So you're right in terms of subcontractors to our prime contracts. The responsibility sits with the prime contractor. The input that we have is really around defining well the specifications and the performance indicators for the prime contractor. And as you can imagine, with the particularly those facilities contracts, they're massive contracts, right? They're really complex, and there's a lot of work that needs to go into managing those on an ongoing basis through the contract management team that sits within community facilities. I can't speak, I mean, I can speak broadly around contract management. I think it's an area that we can improve on as an organisation, largely because we have so many contract managers within the business who are, their role isn't a contract manager, but they have contract management responsibilities as part of their role, if that makes sense. Community facilities do have their own contract managers, so I'd recommend potentially if you've got some specific challenges or issues around those contracts, it may be worth having a conversation with community facilities and Taryn, who I'm sure will be happy to come and present. Yeah.
Well, I will, but it gets to the point where I have to look at this and say, well, I have to presume as a regional councillor that you and Taryn and others are recognising the problem definition here and getting on top of that. And I'm just really worried. And it's not just about the fact that we've had a whole lot of wet weather. It's about a consistency of stewardship and auditing in relation to how the head contracts are filtering through to performance standards or lack of standards at the subcontractor level.
Mm-hmm.
I know that people get COVID, people, leave and, equipment breaks down and we get boggy weather and what have you, but still there needs to be a standard for which people are working to on a consistent basis that doesn't oblige, the mayor and the 20 councillors to be out there constantly pushing around whether the mowing and the line trimming is going to happen or whether the subcontractor is just basically having a laugh.
I might, do you want to turn your mic off? I might take that via you, Chair. Yes, I think we recognise your issue that you have exposed there, Councillor Newman. I do know that, for instance, that in the Manurewa area there was over 800 audits done in the last half of last year, and a high percentage of success with that. What Matt's pointing out in the procurement space is that we do have opportunities to enhance that contract management, to ensure those audits are done in a timely fashion, that there's enough of them, that they target the right SLAs, and the implications for the contractor, the head contractor, are cogent enough and real enough that it impacts upon their need to have quality subcontractors as well. So thank you for that.
Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Matt. One of the slides up there, I had a question about one of the slides there. We could just go back. It's right near the beginning, and you had 4 of them, and the one in the bottom right-hand corner there, that one, the performance there. Right? I don't think we had a chance to see 70%. That last one, the performance, the second point down. Could you just? I don't think we covered that in any detail. Questions around that.
What that means is 70% of the overall spend is contested, so it has multiple bids coming through, or it could be through a quotation, it could be through a tender, but it's multiple people bidding on the work.
Okay, and then across this, thank you for that. Across this, another question. Across the CCOs, so when these contracts are undertaken, could you just talk through the process in terms of how that is measured and monitored within each? Are there personnel in there that evaluate each project and report back to you? How does that work?
In terms of when we do a group source project, so the process is that we will work closely with the procurement staff from the other CCOs. We will have one tender, if you like, that we take to the market. When suppliers provide their responses, they will come back in. We will then have representatives of each of the CCOs as part of the evaluation team to review all of the responses from their suppliers and to come up with a common agreement as to which supplier or suppliers we want to select for the group. Once that process has taken place, we'll either have one contract which sits across the group, or we may have essentially the same contract but duplicated for some slight variations of requirements across the CCOs. And then the overall management of those contracts sits with the CCOs. In some cases, we do have supplier management, which we do collaborate with our CCOs and help to have that CCO level governance across those suppliers, but that's not a contract level. That's at supplier level, right? So you might have a supplier that has multiple contracts. So we'll work with those guys collaborative across the group.
I'm just trying to get a handle on, so once the work's delivered, right, and somebody checks that, how well that they performed against that, in terms of how any potential alerts, how that works across the CCOs, how you get transparency of that, and if there's any concerns, how that might come back to this committee.
So, for example, if there was a poor performing supplier in AT, how would we find out in AC that they had been a poor performer? There's no specifically defined process for that. I mean, I know it does happen, but it's more on probably on an ad hoc basis, I'd say. So, yeah, we don't have to do that really, you'd need a centralized supplier performance system in order to make sure that you had absolute oversight of supplier performance across the group, and we don't have that system.
Okay, just perhaps the thought leading on from that then, Matt, might be around, we've got a policy in place as a group across, includes them, and there may be, I guess wondering, so if somebody doesn't deliver to the satisfaction of somebody that might be measuring it, and we don't get visibility of that, could there, I don't know if you know this or not, but could there potentially be conflict in terms of we're trying to deliver to that policy in terms of some inclusiveness around whatever that policy might be, right? Within that, and if that's not delivered on, we never find out about it, or if it's poor performance against that criteria, whatever they were in that contract, that it might not be picked up or visible to us as a committee.
Well, what I would say is anything that we're putting forward, right, when we're coming to the committee with a recommendation, we have gone through our own process. If it's just an Auckland Council project, right, we've gone through a full assessment of that supplier's capability, which is really in depth, and it does include taking references, and we do follow up. We do take quite detailed referees of suppliers to make sure that their performance is in line with what they set out, and this is with other customers. That other customer may be another government agency, or maybe another CCO, or it may be a private entity. It's case by case, right? So acknowledge that, yes, there isn't a system which looks at or gives us the visibility of all contract performance of all suppliers that work with the other CCOs. That would be a pretty massive investment in technology and a tool to do that. Do we get information of a supplier performing badly in a CCO and that helps inform us on decision making? Yes, we do. That does happen. I can't say it happens all of the time because it'd be almost impossible to set that up, again, unless you had a centralized supplier performance management tool that facilitated that, and we don't have that.
All right, thank you. I'll just leave it at that, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Mayor Brown.
Good presentation, thanks. On the procurement, I've got about 4 or 5 questions you've sort of put up with me. On the procurement policy frameworks, and you've got 6 principles. I would like to think that principles 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 were principles in order to deliver 5. 5 is what you're trying to do. So rather than have it as an equal one, I'd feel better if you had 5 principles to deliver the best value for every dollar. That's what the aim of what you're trying to do is. Within your thing, do you count attributes before going to price?
In terms of how we structure the RFP, yes, we evaluate non-price first. So people who are a scorer in the RFP assessment, they don't get to see the price before they start scoring the suppliers on their non-price, which is their attributes, their capability, their track record.
I mean, that came out of early running of Waka Kotahi, that whole thing. And it's one of those things which sounds good if you're not in business. But if you're on the other side of it. So if you count, if you count attributes and you award the points, do you then just go to price, or are people with better attributes allowed to have a higher price?
So the way that the formula works, if you like, is there's a weighting for price and non-price, a percentage weighting. the scores will get tallied up for the non-price attributes and then the weighting applied. So let's say, for example, it's 80% non-price, 80% of the score gets tallied up, and then the price will be added after that. That then gives you an overall ranking based on the percentage weighting for price and non-price. But my guidance on this is it is just a formula, right? It's not going to spit out the right outcome every time. So it's not like the supplier that comes through rank number 1, they automatically win that contract. It needs to be considered with all of the factors that have been put forward, all of the risks that are associated, for example, with the different bids. The fact that you could see someone coming in and trying to win the business by just coming in ridiculously low on the price to skew the result. You would take the judgment of the people evaluating to see that that's clearly what's happening, and therefore the fact they've come to rank number 1 because they came in at half the price of everybody else, that's a bit suspicious. So we do look at everything. It's not linear.
I've got to say that I really, really don't like that. And everyone games it. I'd like to, we do counter attributes, and you have a minimum point at which everyone's got to get a certain number of points. Then you just go to price, in my view, because otherwise, because I noticed that under one of the attributes is track record, usually, and they would go for, they asked to list your 5 best jobs, okay? When in the real world, everyone wants to know what is the 5 worst jobs they've done. And so typically smaller firms with good track records don't have to be cheaper than big lumbering oafs that we see everywhere in the civil work who put in, because I can remember we used to compete with Waikato to do roading engineering, and then the big firms, and it'd be a rural road, which is what we did every private one for, but on the public ones, the big Waka Kotahi favourites would score more, so they could charge more, and they would, under their attributes, they'd have their 5 best jobs, and they'd list motorways, but we're doing a rural road, and so they get more points because we hadn't done a motorway, and yet we'd say, if you do their 5 worst ones, look at let's have a look at just what their last effort was on, say, the Brindewans, where it all fell down that they did before. Or no, that isn't, so that there's a real danger in that. So if you want to do track record, ask for the 5 worst jobs they've had, because how they fix things is what is the most important thing out of contracting. Did they fix it up when it went wrong, or did they walk away? Because the other thing I've noticed is that the best driver for rural things, because you were going to do a job in Rodney, which is a big worry for you, you know, that Warahini probably won't score as well as Fulton Hogan because of the size, and yet Warahini can't afford to do a bad job in the area where they live, whereas Fulton Hogan can. This is not against either of those. I've used both of those companies, they're quite good. But the people supporting work in their own area where they've got to compete with within their own area have a bigger discipline on them than larger groups who can go somewhere else after they've made a cock of it. So I would like to I know it's how Waka Kotahi do it, and it's probably how A2 do it, which even worries me more. I think you should set a minimum standard that everyone should meet and then go to price.
So we do have minimum standards. We do have a cut-off point. If a supplier doesn't score the minimum standard in any particular attribute, they don't get to move forward. So we do have pass-fail on attributes.
So if you don't bear with me, Chairperson, then the other thing is, because that's more applicable for contractors, for engineers or builders or something at the heart to define what the work is. One of the things that worries me is quite often procurement policies make it really hard for new entrants. And I'd just like to see that somehow or other as a check on this, are you refreshing your field every so often? Because if it's hard for new entrants to get in there, they'll go elsewhere. and we sometimes miss out. And it's interesting how new entrants can become the ultimate. They could be someone on the rise. There was a company called FNR up north who are a new entrant, and they've just driven down as in Fulton's out of the district because they were so good. But it was so hard for them to get started. The private sector picked them up way before the public sector did. So do you talk to private sector buyers of the similar services? I mean, I often wondered why it is that the private developers, which I'm in, never use the companies that the government use. We use different companies, and we're interested in value. And so, two last little bits there. How do you make sure that you're not being a victim of ring tendering? Because there's a certain volume of works put out, and the contractors are pretty good at, and they suck in groups like Infrastructure New Zealand who don't seem to understand this at all. They want to publish the amount of work that's coming out. Now, there's only 4 or 5 big firms that might be able to do that. And so availability out of those 5, some of them have no availability at certain times, and some of them have availability at other times. And they all know who's going to win it on availability of, if you've got 3 of them totally committed with work stream and there's 2 left, it's going to be those 2 for your next ones. And if you get down to situations, one, they'll just charge you through the roof. So you don't, it may not be quite ring tendering in terms of the illegal sense of it, but it's not far off it, and the players know who's going to win. And so kind of like you've almost got to suspend disbelief in your systems at times because they sound very good, but it's so easily gained. Now, the last one I want to talk about is volume supplies of simple things. And I'll give you an example of at the hospital. We use, maybe 5 million 50 million paracetamol pills a year or something, just as an example. I don't know if that's the right number, but a large number of some things. And in order to get the price down, we had to close down the points of entry into the system. Because if every doctor could buy the things, they'd buy all sorts of different brands. They'd be in drawers all over the place. No one knew how much we had of the stuff. We failed to get the price volume gain until we went to close off all points of entry to a single point of entry. And we not only went for price, we made the supplier the person to manage the amount of available material, in other words. So if we were going to use if there was 50 million of these, whatever it was we might buy, we want to make sure we get the best price by having one supplier for that. But that person was told that, for instance, there is never to be less than 50,000 of those available in the system and never to be more than 100,000. So they had to control the inventory because otherwise we got overwhelmed with inventory, all got lost and ended up in drawers and never got used. And so inventory control is something which you're probably well aware of and maybe doing this at any level. I'll just raise it so that that's something I worry about, inventory control and limited points of entry. And then we announced that because we'd had various people and doctors say, oh no, those pills aren't as good as the pills from this brand. And you'd think, well, they're generic, how can that be? And then you discover, oh, well, that particular brand had paid for them to have a holiday somewhere or other. And so that was why they were better. So everyone is trying to game you. So, trust nobody is a good start. And make sure you get some new entrants. And hopefully you don't mind me giving that little bit of advice, but
that's fine.
That's from a person who's been on the outside and been gamed. So, but good on you, and thanks for your presentation. And thanks for worrying about all this stuff. But you're a very important point of entry and cost control and inventory control of our system. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought that was a a good lesson of the gamekeeper and the poacher having a discussion between each other. Councillor Walker.
Got a few questions, and you're welcome to come back to me at a later point. Something that I've raised in the past is rather than contracting by geography, which essentially is what happens with a lot of our big contracts, we segment Auckland into north, south, east and west. Mm-hmm. The possibility of contracting by a particular activity or technology. And given that increasingly much of contracts are technology driven, you know, if you've got the right technology, you invest in the stuff, you buy it, you're actually better off putting something. And for example, it could be weed management, where there are various different forms of weed management rather than simply using glyphosate. So you take that approach across the region rather than the geographical approach where the big contractor really doesn't have much of an interest in that. They divvy it out to some contractors and you don't always get the best results. So I've got a question around reassessing contracts by activity or technology rather than geography. The other question I've got is just around whether in your management of contracts you have exception reporting, particularly looking at variations and scope creep and all that kind of stuff. So that you get a handle on things, because as the Mayor mentions, you know, this whole situation gets gamed all the time and these people know how to get the variations. More often than not, they have more expertise around contracts sometimes than we have, I think. But anyway, let's put that to one side. And the other question I've got, and again, I don't need an answer right now, is I have a real concern around in our procurement and the like, around our access to information, corporate knowledge, particularly as it goes to aspects of the roading network, the stormwater network, catch pits and all this kind of stuff, and how much we're actually retaining that from one contract to another. I'd really like to know who I can talk with around that, because it concerns me that my belief is that we're losing some of that. So a few questions there. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, happy to take those. In terms of the example you gave there around contracting by speciality versus location, I mean, and you gave the example of weed management, and I'm assuming sort of contracts such as the full facilities contracts as well, which are set up in that way. I mean, ultimately, yes, we can contract whoever we wish to contract, right? But at the time that we went into those contracts, the procurement strategy that was developed with the business was to go for a regional contract with all of the capabilities, whether that's weed management, the cleaning, everything was lumped in by region. So that was the strategy. And for me as a procurement professional, you need to go to market with a strategy. Now, over time, that will tell whether the strategy was right or wrong, or whether there's tweaks you can make to make it better next time. But you can't go to market with no strategy. So with those contracts, the strategy at the time, which was considered to deliver the best outcomes, was on a regional basis. Again, you can change that. You can, when the contracts come up, and the contracts do come up, 2027, the team will be within PCF looking at what's the best strategy going forward to manage the same scope of services.
So my question is around reassessment. I mean, 2027 is a long way out. So I'm making the assumption that there's ongoing assessment. Happy to have a conversation with you later around that. So on to the other.
So I know PCF are looking at what the pathway is to that contract endpoint. What I would say is there'd be a huge amount of work before you're even at the point to then go to market to request submissions for those services. It's not something you can do in a few weeks. There's a huge amount of work to package that all up and develop your strategy to a point where you're ready to take it to market. But again, this is something that really sits with the leadership within Parks and Community Facilities, but I'm happy to have a chat with them and report back if you like. Your second point around scope creep, contract variations, things like that. Yes, we do have reporting. We have a compliance team that runs reports and looks at contract variations and by percentage of the original contract, and that does get flagged. And if there's an anomaly there, that will get looked into, and the reason for that will have to be sort of provided to that team. Sorry, the last question was around retaining knowledge of contracts mainly in roading.
Just roading, particularly stormwater. Conceivably, I mean, I'll give you an example. We switched the contract for mowing of fields, and another contractor came along and they used mowing technology that got bogged down. It couldn't cope with the weather and made a hell of a mess. The corporate knowledge was not assessed adequately. We didn't hold it adequately. We just assumed that the contractors knew, and Councillor Stewart will tell you it really messed up. That's just an example. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor covered almost everything I was going to say, and it actually amazes me how, from a trade position looking up, it's almost exactly the same vision as from a larger perspective looking down. I do think I have a couple of things I can contribute to it though. When you've got a small specialist provider who you have no alternative but to use, but cannot fit all your criteria, what do?
It's quite a broad question. I'd need to understand what the criteria that wasn't being met and what was the specialist requirement.
All right, okay. So my eldest son is a specialist in hydraulic and electronic interface, and you need him for some of your machinery and plant in your baling stations, and he doesn't meet any of your. This is some years ago. He still does it now on a small base, in regular basis. But he couldn't meet any of the stuff and had no interest in meeting any of your stuff, but there's no one else in town who can do it. How did he get that contract in the end?
I need to understand the criteria that he didn't meet and what
he didn't. I helped for many months to try to get him registered with your system. And then I asked him to stand back from trying to meet your system to see what convulsions council would go into over that. And there were many. So I just want to make that point. Happy to talk with you offline with one of those instances that the chair talks about.
I think that would be quite useful for you to do.
So the other thing is, when you've got those smaller contractors who are giving you services, you have you ask them for rates, for hourly rates, for product rates, for stuff like that. So that I understand is weighted at 70%. So that is in your calculation. You've talked before to the mayor about the price being separate to your other attributes being, but in that situation, the part of the attribute is the service rate, correct? How do you separate that out when it's not a contract price?
There's not a set percentage split in terms of we may look to go and determine the best supplier 100% on the quality, the non-price, and not even consider their price, or we have every percentage in between, right? So it's depending on the specific requirement that's taken to market. It's not 70% of price or non-price. It varies. In terms of how do we assess if it's an hourly rate, the price?
Well, it's just that you've got in your. So let's take it to the next step. If the prices are identical from several suppliers or very, very close, then do these small attributes with very little weighting, like have you got a heart tick on your logo, are they what then determines the outcome of who gets accepted?
We don't have criteria like that, but we have quite detailed criteria around methodology, experience, sustainability, delivering for Māori and Pacific Islands. Yep. So it would be if it was a situation where the pricing was identical across 3 suppliers.
The social outcome would be the one that swung it.
No, the likely response would be the overall non-price score would come through as the preferred supplier. But there may be some other things to consider. For example, they may have the best non-price and the price is comparable, so therefore they're ranked number 1. However, they may have a whole bunch of tags in their contract, but they're not prepared to accept liability or indemnity, which would mean they're not a viable solution. So we may go to rank number 2. So there's no black and white answer. It's on a case-by-case basis and on the consideration of the team that are evaluating the responses.
Looking forward to have a meeting one day. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. Take it offline directly with Matt and give specific examples would be really useful. Councillor Lee.
it's more of a comment than question, Mr. Chair, but we are an expenditure control committee, and I'm looking forward to a decision process which will enable us to control expenditure. We have to bear in mind that we have a $295 million deficit we're grappling with, and this is not a one-off. This is serial. There was a $127 million deficit in the last annual plan, and that's only a few months ago. So we're dealing with a systemic problem here. It's easy to get into a sort of a comfortable routine and look at the presentation and ask questions and so on. But we have to, and I'll repeat what I said in the confidential session, fundamentally we're dealing with policies and strategies which we've inherited from the previous administration. And a lot of these costs have to relate to that. And so our task on behalf of the people of Auckland is to get this spending problem under control. And what I'm concerned about it and seeing this presentation here is that $1.2 billion worth of procurement in a year, and all seems to be very well. But leaving aside the council's own costs, which something we'll need to look at, and overheads we need to look at, the problem must be coming from somewhere. And therefore, we need advice from the staff where this problem is, because they know more about it than we do. And so I'm looking for some rigour here to enable us to undertake our mission with some success on behalf of the people of Auckland. We also have another factor here, and that is the extreme weather emergency. Clearly, our functions came under scrutiny during those floods in particular, and in particular our role, or council's role, as the owner of stormwater infrastructure and roading infrastructure. And questions have been raised, quite valid questions, about how competent we have been in managing that infrastructure. Now, clearly, once upon a time, that infrastructure was directly managed by the council, but we're now in a different world whereby we interface with the private sector. So we have a council which has a number of political obligations, even in procurement, which must complicate matters, dealing with a hard-nosed, strictly commercial private sector corporate world, much of it overseas owned. And therefore, I could take this presentation and say, all is well. Looks pretty good to me. And we're doing some good things as well as commercial procurement. We're adding in lots of nice other things. Even the way we meet and do contracts, that's all very well and good. The fact of the matter is, we're in a $295 million hole, and I am looking for council staff to assist us to try and resolve this problem. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, I think that definitely wins the chocolate fish for best presentation of the day. Well done. Okay, Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for your presentation. I agree with a lot of what His Worship was saying about having some more flexibility in the process to allow for local groups and for new groups and innovative groups to take part in the procurement process. Probably since I've been involved in this local government space since 2013, we've heard from local boards constantly, that there are issues where, you know, a project gets approved, but we have to use a group from the procurement list to deliver that project locally. And there have always been complaints from local boards that that could have been done by a local group more culturally, appropriately, and usually at a better price as well. And I can just think of one example recently with the EVAC centres that were set up. We had 27 set up across the region. The security groups that we used, you know, as part of our procurement, we used whoever it was. But for at least 3 of the EVAC centres that I went to, locally, it would have been better to use a local security company, because culturally, socially, they would have been a better fit. And we had issues at those 3 EVAC centres that security company couldn't handle. And then our council staff and our community groups and our Defence Force personnel on site had to help with the security of the EVAC centre. That's just one example, but we've got lots and lots of examples, and I'm sure Councillor Turner knows of many as well, where local boards have complained that local groups aren't able to take part in that procurement process for lots of reasons. I wonder if you are open to having local boards have some input into that. They can give you that intel about who these local groups are. They may need a little bit of support from that local board in terms of building their capacity up, and local boards have some LDI that can help to do that. But being able to introduce them to you or to the team or whoever, so that they can at least be on that horizon, or, you know, have that first foot into the procurement process might be good. Is that possible, and what would be the process for that? Kia ora.
Yeah, I'm happy for you know, your local board's view of suppliers they know who they think can do a good job to get in touch, and I can put them in touch with the appropriate people on my team. Look, it's a really hard balance between working with lots of smaller organisations and balancing the resources that we have as a department and the outcomes that we need to achieve. There's some instances where our requirements are too vast for a smaller supplier to participate in, but that's not all of them. There are lots of opportunities that exist, which could be managed by the more SME type suppliers. I guess we often get complaints around we have too many large contracts, but the reality of going the other way and having too many small contracts, it'd be impossible to manage it and deliver the outcomes that we need to do. So it is a balancing act that we need to try to achieve. In terms of sort of culturally aligned suppliers, yeah, and that links to our targets around our diverse supplier spend. It is an area of focus for me. I can't really talk too much about it because we're in the process now. We've got a memo draft that hasn't been out for review yet, but one thing we're looking to do is the establishment of a diverse supplier panel, because recognising the fact that a lot of these guys, they don't necessarily win the contracts that they put in the proposal for, or even sometimes they don't even put a proposal in because they've done it a few times and they haven't got anywhere, and they get fed up and they can't be bothered anymore because they feel like they're just not standing a chance. So there is some work happening, and I'll be able to talk about that in the future when it's approved. But yeah, it's a big area of focus for me.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just, Councillor Lee and Councillor Newman, can you make sure you take your toilet breaks or coffee breaks separate from each other? Because you are our quorum right now. If you both leave the room, we cannot continue. So you can, one of you can go or the other, but not together. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you.
You might want to enlarge the committee.
No, there was no suggestion of any impropriety. I was trying to be polite.
I'm happy to come on the committee and make up a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. My question is about what happens at the end of contracts where the work is ongoing, but the incumbent is not successful in winning the contract again, and what ability we have to, I guess, exert some pressure, perhaps some legal contractual pressure around the state that they leave things in and the handover that they undertake. The specific examples I'm thinking of is where we have changed cleaning contractors because the cleaning has been substandard, and all of the thinking about public toilets, right? Toilets and facilities, all of the containers that hold the soap, the containers that hold the toilet paper, those are often owned by the contractor. And what they do is they lose the contract and they rip them out. And the new contractor puts new ones in, which is firstly incredibly wasteful. But also the contractor who's leaving has no incentive to leave things tidy for the next one. And so we sort of see this continual cycle of things ripped out of walls that we then have to fix and things like that. So what are some of the processes that we can use to stop that kind of thing from happening? They know they're not going to get the contract again. They've lost it because they weren't doing a good enough job. And so they don't have any reputational risk. What are the other things we can bring to bear in those situations? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Councillor Ferry, I might ask you to, if you can, send me the specifics on this, because I'm not an expert in this particular contract that you may be talking about. I have no idea where it sits, but I guess the answer to your question is the usual remedy would be within the contract, but without knowing what the contract is and not knowing what the clauses are that specify what the if you like, the state that or the conditions these guys need to work to, it's really hard to say what the appropriate remedy is. I'd need to look into it specifically. I don't know. I know, for example, when we lease buildings, we have sort of maintenance clauses. I do not know if we have that within the facilities contracts for maintenance around if they need to leave it in the same state they found it in around the equipment that's put in there. I'd need to go away and look into that.
Sure. I was really just using that by way of example. I think really what I'm trying to get at is the principle of, I would expect that all of these contracts do have a, you leave it as you found it. It needs to be sort of in a blank canvas situation or whatever the technical term is. But what I'm concerned about is that we then don't actually pursue that. Potentially, council tends to be very conservative about legal action, and there are some good reasons for that. But in this case, where we've got breach of contract, and yes, I'm thinking of specific example, but I'm sure there are many where they haven't exited in the way that was agreed. Do we pursue those, acknowledging that, for them, probably the reputational risk of not getting another contract with council is kind of neither here nor there. So, for them, ripping stuff out and leaving our things damaged is of little consequence to them unless we are enforcing the contract, the end of the contract. Do we do that?
So I can give you my view of that, and that's that we should do that. I can't sit here and confirm that we do that in every single time that arises. I just don't have visibility of what those specifics are as the contract management sits within the business, particularly in the facilities space. There's contract managers who manage those contracts. If I was leading that contract management team, my recommendation would be that, yes, they do follow up on any contractual obligations and they follow through with these suppliers, but I can't sit here and give you an honest answer as to whether that happens 100% of the time.
Sure, thank you. Can I suggest then that there might be some conversations to have, particularly with local boards, about letting them know that is probably an expectation in most of these contracts, and therefore when they see instances where that hasn't been honoured, what is the process by which they report those? Because, you won't have people on the ground who are inspecting every toilet block after the cleaning contractor changes, and that's fair enough. But we've got, 149 people out there who are real eyes and ears for that stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, so my understanding would be they should report through to the local area managers within PCF.
Thank you. They may not always know that a contract's changed and that's why that's happened. So there needs to be a bit of joined up thinking, I think, there. Thanks, Chair. Thanks.
Just going to say for cleaning specifically, cleaning's not carved out of the full facilities contract, so it should fall under the main agreement for whatever the region is.
Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Matt. My question was just following on from Councillor Foley. Have you noticed that there has been, or that local procurement has been enabled specifically under the $75,000 benchmark?
We do have some stats around what is local procurement, and you can probably get into a conversation around how do you define local procurement as well, because the vast majority of our spend is within Auckland, right? And then you can then go hyper-local into particular suburbs. That is something that would be potentially challenging to measure within our system. And to be honest, it would probably, if you looked at the percentage of spend that could be adequately provided hyper-local, it would probably be quite a small percentage of the overall spend. So I can provide some measurements on what's local procurement in terms of what are we hitting as a percentage. I will have a conversation around how far we can drill down into a hyper-local sense, but I can't really comment on that right now, Councillor Dalton.
That's okay, Matt. Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Look, I just think it has been a thing for local boards, but I also think that as we move forward to bulk funding local boards, it will become more relevant. So the work can wait. You don't need to get any information back to me today. Oh, I mean, on this particular question today. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Really good presentation.
I have a red light on.
Right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, very good presentation. Can you just tell me, how do we deal with contractors that are constantly underperforming? And a really good example, and I know it's one that Councillor Williamson knows all about, Evelyn Road in Cockle Bay. There were some roadworks that should have taken about 6 or 7 days to do, and it actually took around about 2 years to complete. The workmanship was really, really dodgy. And do we have a system and process to keep an eye on our contractors? Some of these contractors, they seem to keep getting the council work all the time. We seem to keep rolling over and giving them the jobs. That's just one of the, well, I'll let you answer that one first. Thank you.
I'm not familiar with a specific example. It's probably an AT contract, but what I can comment, and it'll be the same for AT as well with AC, is yes, we have, it varies from contract to contract, but we have remedies within our contracts that we can enforce for underperformance. So typically there'll be KPIs that are in place, and failure to meet those KPIs will vary by contract to contract, but there'll be cause to terminate, for example, for breach of contract. In some of our contracts, there are financial implications of not performing the work, such as withholding payments. But again, this will be dependent from contract to contract. But yeah, within those sort of contracts you're talking about, there will be remedies available for poor performance from suppliers.
Okay, so not just Auckland Transport, but other CCOs, and they should all come under the umbrella of the Auckland City Council. And it's not just them, looking at other contractors like Councillor Walker was talking about the mowing of the lawns and some of the workmanship there. Quite often the quality is really, really poor, and yet people are told this all the time, but it just seems to keep on just happening and happening and happening. So somebody really doesn't seem to be checking on it, or how can we deal with that? Because that is probably one of the biggest gripes that people in the community complain about, the state of our parks and reserves.
So my recommendation with complaints around the facilities, the parks, would be to contact the local area manager for within PCF, Parks and Community Facilities. They do have auditors within that department. They do have contract managers, operational people whose role it is to review the performance of those vendors and also rectify any issues that have occurred. I do know that they have used those contracts in the past, the remedies within them, to withhold payment, to send suppliers out to rectify the work at no additional cost. I know they do use the levers they have available to them. But yeah, if there's particular issues that you've got, I'd point you towards the operational team within PCF to notify them.
It's just that some of these contractors, their contracts seem to roll over year by year, and sometimes for 3 or 4 years they roll over. So it's very, very difficult to discipline them when they've got such a long rollover.
Councillor Turner has another intervention.
Sorry, just a very quick one. You made the comment that you can't handle lots and lots of small contractors, sort of manage them, but isn't that exactly what the kind of super contractors do? You know, your providers subcontract a lot of small providers. So is there not a duplication of management here?
I don't believe so. I mean, I can give you I'll make up an example. Let's say we have one contract for all of the ARB work in Auckland. It's a $10 million contract. Another way we could structure that would be to have 100 smaller contracts to do the same piece of work. What that would mean is rather than have one person to manage that one contract, we probably need 10 contract managers to manage the 100 contracts, possibly more. We would need 100 contracts that need to be administrated rather than one contract. We'd need to have 100 times the amount of goods receipting, invoice processing and payment. So the amount of work required is quite significantly larger as you start to extend the number of suppliers that you have. So most big organizations, private sector, they do actively review the number of suppliers that they have across their whole supply chain and actively target to reduce it. You normally see you normally saw expansion of supply bases. I mean, when I was at Air New Zealand, it was one of our key metrics was looking at the total number of suppliers we had and trying to reduce that because of the knock-on effects that number of suppliers has on the cost to administer.
So how many people work in the council's procurement team?
We have 55, of which most of those are in the procurement delivery team.
Okay, I don't have any other names. I've let this be a very wide-ranging discussion. I'll be accused of being a chairman who allows meetings to flow all over the place, but I just think it was really worthwhile letting individual councillors report back to you some of their concerns or some of the issues that they raised. In the case of the one Councillor Stewart raised, a particular road out in the Howick ward, 2.5 years of a redo of a redo of a redo, where it got dug back up and then done again, dug back up and done again, a phenomenal inconvenience to all the residents who were literally crying when we were talking to some of them with rocks in their garden, and the big contractor just went on and did it again and then again, and there seemed to be, and when it is an AT contract, and when I raised it with a very senior person in AT, the response I got was, you surely don't expect me to know about every road in Auckland. Well, no, I don't, but I do expect you to know about roads where your contract is blowing out badly over a period of time and obviously a period of cost that's excessive. And I just think that's something that we should be continuously keeping an eye on, not only Auckland Council, but the CCOs, that if they've got that exceptions report coming to them every week of projects that are over budget or over time for delivery, then a blowtorch can be put on those that are delivering it. Okay, I think we'll call this one to an end, and I've got a recommendation that we receive the strategic overview from the Council's procurement department. Oh, I've got one more quick thing to say. I'm going to use my chairman's prerogative. I have raised with officials, and I just want Council Laws to know that I've had expressed to me quite serious concern about how invoicing the council from events that have occurred around the flood and Cyclone Gabriel can be quite seriously gamed, and invoices that aren't legitimate get sent in. And we've agreed at a formal meeting yesterday with officials that Peter was chairing, is that we will be very vigilant, and if invoice boxes of them start flowing in, they won't just get paid. There will be a very stringent process. Is this ours? Is this somebody else's? Is it a government agency? Is it a private sector? If it is ours, Was it something that needed to be approved, not just done, and then we told you, here's the bill? So I had a bit of experience as an associate minister for the Canterbury earthquake recovery of seeing what boxes of invoices that no one knew who they were from just coming in, and people just paying them, and said, whoa, let's put a hold on that. And I think you can all be assured that our council staff are well aware that they have to keep a vigilant eye, they have to pay bills that are genuinely as, but that we will be very, very watching for anyone that tries to game it or throws in a whole lot of invoices that are not legitimate to it. Councillor Stewart?
Just on that, so I think this is a good opportunity to make sure that even the private sector, everybody knows that they can't just send it in to the council for the council or to central government to pay for it. So it's a good opportunity for people to realise they can't just go spending money and then saying, oh, but we've done that for this or that. They have to tick all the boxes, and if they haven't ticked all the boxes and come and got the appropriate sign-off, the best to stay out of it. Otherwise, they'll be having to pay for it themselves. Is that correct?
It's not quite correct, because I think there will be times when something had to urgently be just done, they've done it, and it was a legitimate thing to have done, and they should be compensated for it. So there won't necessarily be, well, I didn't go through the formal process, but I think the vast majority of people supplying services and product as part of the recovery and the remediation and repatriation and rebuild, they should know that there is a proper process. If they follow it, they will get their invoices paid by the right agency. And again, demarcation between agencies, when you've got a national emergency and a regional emergency, and you've got government departments providing certain things, and you've got council doing some, and CCOs, very, very, very complex to keep good guardrails around invoicing and paying them. But I believe our council officers are very aware to be vigilant for that and keep watching. Okay, we're going to have to move on. We're going to move into a confidential session in a minute, but I've got a resolution before us. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Mover from Daniel Newman. Seconded from Mike Lee, I think, because you're only on the committee as the two of you. Let's go with Daniel Newman, seconded by Mike Lee. Those in favour, we received the report. Those against, that's done. Declare it carried. Item 11, consideration of extraordinary business. Oh, sorry, I've got to move something here with regards to the papers that have been disseminated. And this is a very simple one, if we can pull that out. Yes, that we received the summary of information for Expenditure Control Procurement Committee memorandums and briefings. Those are briefings that have been sent out either on Nexus or that you'll be getting PDFs and so on in the email. My understanding, don't know why, but we have to just receive that. So moved. So seconded by Mr. Lee. Those in favour, those against, done. Cool. Consideration of extraordinary business. I was attempting to bring an item onto this, but I've been advised that that would have been a foolish move, and it needs to be done more formally. What I was hoping to do was that this committee gave a direction to all of council officers that we try to put a hold on all discretionary expenditure. And while we're looking to see how we go about responding to Gabriel and to the 27th of January floods. I still think that's something we should as a committee be directing, but I know that I couldn't come into a late item without being ultra vires when a whole lot of, I'm only learning the ropes here, guys, so give me a break. But I would hope for our next committee meeting, we will have an item that will give a very clear steer that we've got to sort of almost stop. I think this comes under what Councillor Newman said earlier, that if you are sailing on a port tack and there's a massive wind shift come, which is the case of an election, then you've got to actually decide, do you want to stay on that tack or do you want to switch and sail with the wind that way? And so there are some things that I would like to put on hold if they are discretionary while we look at what the bill is going to be, because I have a fear, having seen the Christchurch recovery, the bill is going to be a lot bigger, and I don't know how much insurance will cover, and I don't know how much other bodies will cover, but I believe the bill will end up being a lot bigger than, sorry? No, I don't know. I've got no information. So I just believe that we've got to make sure that we are really controlling our expenditure. But we can't put that on.
Is it possible for us to move accordingly, Mr. Chair?
No, it's not. It's not.
Point of
It's
order.
for this.
Point of order, please.
Yep,
We had
point of order.
an attempt from Councillor Henderson to ask a question which was overlooked in regard to some quite serious allegations that you made on the previous item. And now we're talking about an extraordinary item that we can't actually even consider. Can we please have some rigour in the chairing? Thank you.
Sure. Let's move on. We have done that.
Sorry, can I resume?
No, I've been told by officials we cannot.
But we just moved earlier in the meeting that we have to consider a so-called revenue generating opportunity.
So we passed that on to AT to consider.
Yeah, but we did move it, that it should be considered seriously. Why can't we consider it now? Something wrong.
This is, we're going to move into a confidential session, and I think that's where you may want to discuss some things further. So I would like to declare this part of the meeting closed. Can I get a mover and a second that we declare this move again from Daniel Newman, seconded by Councillor Lee. I think have to be members of the committee. Those in favour that we close this. And those, right, so that's carried. So we're now going to ask everybody that's not entitled to be present here to leave. Going to do 5 minutes to just set up the room for the confidential service prioritisation framework presentation.